The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom took what worked from Breath of the Wild and catapults it to new heights, literally. The game has been out for more than 2 years now, but with the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2 and a dedicated Switch 2 edition of Tears of the Kingdom, a lot of people are diving back into the latest mainline Zelda game while we all wait for whatever Nintendo is cooking up next. If you are planning on returning to Hyrule, here's a guide on everything that's been added to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom since it came out in 2023. Following the release of Tears of the Kingdom, fans were hopeful that Nintendo would soon announce a substantial bit of DLC similar to the additional content added for Breath of the Wild that introduced trial dungeons, new story content, and a literal motorcycle for Link to ride. However, just a few months after Tears launched, Eiji Aonuma, producer of the Legend of Zelda series, confirmed that there wouldn't be any substantial DLC for the game. There are hundreds of hours of content in Tears of the Kingdom, but not to sound ungrateful, that's it. No expansion pass, no DLC, no new content. While there isn't any DLC for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, it has received a handful of minor updates. As is usually the case with Nintendo, the patch notes are pretty bare bones and vague. They do cite some specific bugs that have been fixed, like quest pathing issues and audio level problems, but the note that accompanies all 5 patches says several issues have been addressed to improve the gameplay experience, which isn't particularly helpful. People in the game's community have noted that the patches removed item duping glitches and other farming tactics, which means you'll have to get rare crafting materials the old-fashioned way. The post-launch content updates for Tears of the Kingdom are slim. However, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game adds a solid lineup of features to it. Before we dive into what's coming to the upgraded edition, it's worth explaining the potentially confusing upgrade path for anyone who already owns Tears of the Kingdom. If you have the game and a Nintendo Switch 2, you won't need to purchase it again. Instead, you can upgrade to the new version for $10. However, if you're a subscriber to the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pass service, you'll be able to upgrade it for free. If you don't currently own The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, you'll be able to pick up the Switch 2 edition for Nintendo's controversial $80 price tag. The Switch 2 version of Tears of the Kingdom drastically improves the game's performance and resolution. While Tears of the Kingdom ran slightly better than Breath of the Wild, its performance issues still left a lot to be desired. On the Switch 2, the game will run at 60 frames per second at 1080p with HDR support while in handheld mode. Load times for the Switch 2 edition have been improved across the board, making it more seamless than ever to fast travel and load into the different regions of Hyrule. On top of that, save game progress transfers over from the original Switch version, so you don't need to worry about losing hundreds of hours of exploring and collecting Zonai parts when booting Tears of the Kingdom up on the Switch 2. The new version also allows multiple save files on a single Nintendo account, so you can keep your progress and start the game from the beginning if you want. The biggest piece of post-release content for Tears of the Kingdom is being added with the Switch 2 edition. However, the content isn't being added to the game itself. Instead, the Nintendo Switch app is getting a new free feature called Zelda Notes, which is a second screen companion app that players are meant to use while exploring Hyrule. Zelda Notes adds additional voice navigation options, an upgraded photo editor, global statistics, and tracks your individual stats in case you were wondering how many times you've used your Zonai abilities or how many weapons you found. The tracker also adds a Nintendo First, achievements. While the achievements aren't quite the same as what you'd find on the Xbox or with the trophies on the PlayStation, they do give players new goals to work towards. Zelda Notes also uses QR codes to let players share items and auto-build designs, a much requested feature. Now, you won't need to watch YouTube videos telling you the exact angle each Zonai piece needs to be to create tanks and flying machines. The builds are much easier to share thanks to the ease of QR code scanning. The final feature added to Tears of the Kingdom with Zelda Notes is voice memories that act as audio logs left by characters like Princess Zelda, King Rauru, and Master Koga. As you explore Hyrule and the depths below it, Zelda Notes will lead you to areas that the game's cast will comment on, adding new lore that helps connect the story. So that's what you need to know about everything that's been added to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom since its launch in 2023. While there hasn't been any DLC, the Switch 2 edition of the game is adding a fair amount of content with the Zelda Notes app, and the increased resolution and frame rate should hopefully make the Switch 2 version a more definitive way to play it once it launches in June. Thanks for watching, and for more on The Legend of Zelda and all things Nintendo Switch 2, keep kicking it with IGN.